Coming up on Chasing the Natty, it's never too early to start looking ahead to 2022. We got some big names dropping even tonight in the transfer portal. And then it's bowl season just around the corner, and we're going to hit up some previews of the New Year's Six games as well as some games that we find interesting. All that and more coming right up.
Jones goes to the end zone. Oh, what a catch! Devontae Smith, touchdown, Alabama.
Watch out for Mr. Robinson. This kid is going to be special and is already flashing.
This is Chasing the Natty, a college football fantasy podcast.
All right, welcome in everybody. This is Jared Palmgren, host of the Chasing the Natty podcast. I hope you guys are having a wonderful time as the season is kind of drawing to a close. We are officially in the postseason of college football 2021. Things have wound down. Conference championships are over. You guys will painfully remind me of that. In addition, it is time to start turning the pages to next year. Talking about a little bit of this postseason. Got a lot of stuff coming up for you guys that are very exciting. In terms of some housekeeping notes, first of all, you guys always know if you're listening to this, make sure you're following us on whatever platform that you're listening to, whether that be Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, always love those 5-star reviews or whatever review you really want to give us. We always appreciate the honesty. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button, notification bell, and leave a comment down below. I always love hearing from you guys. And then always, if you want to hit me up and if you want to find me, the best way to always reach me is on Twitter. I am at CFF_Jared. And one more little housekeeping note. The schedule that we've had during the season, as best as we've tried to keep to it, we've been doing like the game previews on Tuesdays, and then the weekly recaps we release that to you guys on Mondays. Obviously, with the season coming to a close, we're going to be changing that format as we get here into the off season, and we will be moving back to just one show per week. And these topics are going to be a whole lot more varied. Obviously, during bowl season, we're going to be talking about those games. We'll be talking about different players and such, but also we'll be talking about recaps from 2021. We'll be talking about stuff looking forward to 2022. Lots of great stuff coming up for you guys. But even still, we got a absolutely loaded show for you guys tonight. And really, there's really nobody better in the CFF community for me to talk about all these different topics with than tonight's guest, Mr. Nate Marchese. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Jared. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. So, Nate, why don't you tell everybody how long you've been doing CFF, and as well as just like what kind of stuff you work on? Like, what can people expect if for some reason they're following me but not following you? What can they find that you produce?
Yeah, I appreciate it. I really enjoy you asking me to come on here. I've obviously been following your stuff for as long as you guys have been doing this, so it's pretty exciting to be on with you finally. You can find me at CFF Nate on Twitter. I'm somebody that's just kind of an independent voice in the CFF industry, I guess, so to speak. Love coming on podcasts. Just enjoy talking about it on a Twitter sphere, and I like to do a little bit of research and put out some tweets every now and then that I think help CFF owners as well as C2C owners, and trying to this time of year it's really about just kind of looking forward to 2022 and what's coming up from a dynasty perspective. And as we move into the spring, and once signing day is all taken care of in February, I'll start moving on to, tweeting about some incoming freshmen and that type of thing. So, just love talking college fantasy, and that's why I'm happy to be on right here tonight.
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. You're definitely one of the people that when I first hopped onto the Twitter space and started talking to people, you were easily one of the people I gravitated to very early on. You very much knew what you were talking about. And you kind of touched on it earlier, or touched on it just now. Time to start really kind of looking towards 2022, and there's really no better way to transition to our first segment for tonight, where we're going to talk about, just some thoughts on some early on early first rounders that we could be looking at for the 2022 season for college fantasy football. And you put out a tweet, if I have timestamped this right, you put it out on November 1st. So it's about a month and a half ago. But you were already thinking about this a little while ago. And some of the guys that you kind of put out there as potential first rounders for next year are guys like Brennan Armstrong, Caleb Williams at Oklahoma, Travion Henderson, Xavier Worthy at Texas, Tanner Mordecai, Bijan Robinson still there, Josh Downs, Calvin Austin III, Keishon Butte, Bryce Young, Malik Cunningham, and Sean Tucker. So I just want to, what are your thoughts on those names now, as well as, are there people you've taken off, or are there people that maybe you want to add on to this list that you think people should be considering going forward?
Well, when I sent this tweet, I would have probably been pretty stoked if about half of them actually come true. When you're projecting from November of one year until August of the next year, a lot is going to change. And I mean, nothing is crazier than what's going on in college football right now, between the transfer portal as well as the coaching carousel. I mean, I was listening to the podcast that you did with CK not too long ago, and I think I listened to it maybe 4 or 5 days after you posted it. And you guys did an amazing job, but it was crazy to hear just how much had already changed in those handful of days. So obviously a lot has changed in the last 6 weeks since I sent that tweet out. But I mean, we can just kind of go through the list real quick on some of the guys that I would definitely, think that are probably, and this is not me saying this is who I would project as first round draft picks, but looking at what I'm projecting the CFF ADP to be.
Okay, fair enough.
So a little bit of difference between those two. Obviously, Calvin Austin III has moved on from Memphis, or he will be moving on from Memphis. So we can go ahead and just totally remove him altogether. Some of the people that I think would be questionable on this list anymore, just based off how things have kind of played out. Josh Downs, just not a super strong finish to his season. There's going to be the quarterback change there at North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Sean Tucker, I just don't know if Syracuse has the consistency in their offensive firepower to warrant spending that type of draft capital on a guy like Sean Tucker in the first round. Mm-hmm. Those are the ones that really stand out. There's coaching changes with a couple of these that I think are really going to play a role. Tanner Mordecai, with Sonny Dykes moving on to TCU. I know that Rhett Lashley has produced some really impressive fantasy numbers over his time, but at the same time, there's a coaching change. There's going to be learning a new system. Mm-hmm. They don't quite have the same volume that Sonny Dykes normally produces. And then the one that also sticks out to me is, I would have never guessed this a month ago, but here we are in the middle of the coaching carousel. Brennan Armstrong. Mm-hmm. The fact that Tony Elliott is going over there. I mean, Brennan Armstrong being in that Bronco Mendenhall system, the biggest thing, or the most important thing when you're looking at college fantasy, is beyond any of the analytics, any of the next level stats you're looking at, it's really just comes down to volume. That's what it boils down to. And Brennan Armstrong in a Bronco Mendenhall system, and same thing we saw with Perkins before him. It's volume. I mean, he's going to throw the ball 40 times a game. He's going to run the ball when healthy 10 to 12 times a game. I mean, you're not going to get that type of volume in a Tony Elliott system. Nope. And a part of that's probably because Clemson has played from, the lead most of the time. But I definitely question if Armstrong's one that would be worthy of a first round pick now.
Yeah, I know. I definitely, when I was kind of thinking about this, because when you put this list out, and obviously I don't think you meant this to be Armstrong would be the 101, Williams would be the 102 and stuff like that. But I was thinking back then, I was yeah, Brendan Armstrong comes back another year, he's going to be one of these guys that's going to be in heavy consideration for the 101 pick overall. And I asked this actually the other day. Let's see if I can find this tweet. Meant to save it, and for some reason I didn't. But I put out a tweet the other day where and I just had a feeling, because I was it doesn't feel like there's like an easy 101 this year. Like the past couple of years, you guys got guys like Chuba Hubbard was the 101 going in 2 years ago. This year is Malik Willis. Pretty much everybody was drafting him as a 101. Maybe you got a guy drafting Breece Hall every once in a while. But I figured, I was like, this year doesn't feel like there's like a clear-cut guy that everybody's going to be wanting next year. And I was right. When I put out the tweet where I was like, hey, who's your 101 next year? I got answers from everybody. Or I got answers of all different sorts of people. And like, if I can do, wrong thing. There we go. And like some of the names that you didn't list here, but I think deserve to be discussed here. I list here. Oh my goodness, Jared. Calm down. Try again. Here's some additional names that people are mentioning that I think warrant some discussion. Lots of running backs here. I think a lot of people are very excited about. Braylon Allen. Obviously, he hadn't really caught fire during the time when you sent this tweet. I imagine that had he been doing what he was doing near the end of the year, a guy who has solidified the backfield of Wisconsin obviously is going to be a huge, huge piece in CFF going forward. Lou Nichols has been an absolute monster at Central Michigan, and if he doesn't transfer and he just sticks around for another year, obviously he's going to be somebody that people are going to be drafting very highly next year. Rasheen Ali kind of came out of nowhere really this year as a freshman in Marshall. People are going to be looking at him. Deuce Vaughn, especially in PPR leagues, a lot of people kind of questioning his inconsistency in his freshman year. He would boom some games, bust other games. This year, he's a lot more consistent for people, so I think a lot of people are willing to pay up for him next year. Dillon Gabriel, really, this was kind of born out of the hype of him going to Ole Miss. Now we got word, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but we got word he might be going to UCLA now. So maybe that's not quite first round pedigree that we might be looking for there. Sam Hartman, who's been going off this past year, I believe he finished as a QB4. He's probably going to be a consideration for first round consideration next year. And then Quinn Ewers, just on hype alone, really. The idea that he might be starting in a different offense at Ohio State next year, I think has a lot of people excited. What do you think about these names, Nate?
I am in 100% agreement. If I had to modify the list now, Lou Nichols and Rasheen Ali would for sure be on there. I think you can make a really strong argument for Sam Hartman should he decide to come back. I think he's going to be on there. He's still got some really nice weapons with A.T. Perry, even if Roberson goes pro. And once again, that's a very volume system. So I would be okay with that. Braylon Allen definitely fits that, what we look for in CFF, and that proven system where he's going to get 25 carries a game, that type of thing. I wouldn't put him maybe on the same level as Lou Nichols and Rasheen Ali, but not very far behind. It becomes a case of, okay, so if we're putting these guys on, who are we taking away? We only got 12 spots in an average, draft, a normal standard draft. So, when it comes to somebody like Braylon Allen, if I'm looking at some of these other running backs, 100%, I would take him over Sean Tucker at this point. But I mean, are you going to take him over Travion in that offense, and how consistent he's proven to be, and how, I mean, he became the lifeblood of what they were doing the second half of the season. I mean, you're going to take him over Bijan? I wouldn't, but I can understand an argument for him being in the first round, no doubt. Some of the other guys, as far as like Deuce Vaughn, Hartman, Ewers, I'm sure we'll touch on here in a little bit. But I mean, those are all some really, really strong candidates as well. Yeah,
like you said, it's a very good observation. Talk about like if you're gonna put somebody in, who you taking out. Like obviously Calvin Austin moving on to the NFL, we could take him off this list. Downs, I think Downs is pretty safely, I'd say probably put him down to like a second or third round guy, depending on how much you believe in Drake May. At this point, I'd probably put in Braylon Allen. Lou Nichols definitely would be a first rounder for me at this point. And again, Quinn Ewers again is kind of the interesting name here. And again, we'll talk about him a little bit more once we move on to the transfer portal news. I guess before we move on into that, Quinn Ewers, based on where he landed today, is he a first round pick for you, or you think people should wait?
I think he's a border. So just so that we can fill everybody in, literally about 10 minutes before we hopped on this podcast, he landed at Texas. It was kind of funny because we were messaging before this show that I was pretty confident this morning. As I was drinking my coffee, I messaged you and said, I think Quinn Ewers is going to make an announcement at some point today. And I thought that it was probably going to be Texas because the NIL program and money he's going to make there is going to be absurd. But I think Quinn Ewers is a borderline first round guy. We're looking at some of the other quarterbacks here. Armstrong, Caleb Williams, with Levy. Who else I got here? Mordecai, Bryce Young, Cunningham. So I don't put him in the same categories of Bryce Young, Cunningham, those types of guys. But I do think you could make an argument, just as you could with Caleb Williams, that some of the changes that have happened, they're kind of borderline first round guys. Had he gone to Texas Tech and got with Zach Kittley, forget about it. Not only do I think he's a first round pick, I think you could make a really, really strong case for him being the top overall pick.
I definitely would agree. And before we move on any further into that, we're going to go ahead and officially transfer over into transfer portal news for today. So we'll be right back, y'all.
It's time for transfer portal news.
All right, now we're officially into transfer portal news, and now we got Quinn Ewers, as we mentioned before, transferring from Ohio State to Texas. We've already talked about kind of the CFF impact of this. I'm in agreement with you, Nate, where we're talking about a guy who I think just the hype behind him under a Sarkisian system on offense. I think working with guys like Bijan Robinson, Xavier Worthy, you're looking at a guy just set up for success here. And this is the kind of quarterback, like, you have like 5 stars in some of these recruiting classes, and then you have like guys that if you could give a 6-star, they would get it. Guys like Trevor Lawrence, guys like Bryce Young, guys like Justin Fields from the past couple of cycles. Like, you have other 5 stars, but like there's clearly like the cream of the crop, and Quinn Ewers was that guy last year. When he moved over, when he reclassified, he became the number 1 overall player for the class of 2021. So, I mean, this is a guy that's really going to succeed really anywhere that he goes, and looks like he's set up for success here. What are your thoughts on him transferring from Ohio State to Texas? Is there anything that you've heard maybe that we should know about, things that you think will play into this?
Well, I do think that it's a good fit for him. Sark's proven to be obviously very successful with his quarterbacks, most recently at Alabama. He's going to come in. He's going to win that job immediately. Hudson Card, Thompson, those guys aren't going to beat him out. So he's going to win that job immediately. I think this is wheels up for Xavier Worthy. He's now got, towards the end of the season, there were games where he was getting 20 targets. Now he's got a guy that has all the arm talent you could possibly imagine throwing him the ball. So I do think that this is, for the Texas offense as a whole, this pains me to say this because I am a Sooner grad, but this could lead to them getting a few more transfers in the portal. People might want to follow and be a part of kind of what they've got going on there with him, and Xavier Worthy and Bijan. So I think it's going to work out pretty well for him. Obviously, there's a ton of unknowns. We still haven't even seen this guy throw a pass.
Nope.
In college. He spent a year making a ton of money at Ohio State, but he never threw a pass in a game. So it's going to be really fun to see, how focused he's going to be. Is he really looking to improve? Is he really looking to be a team guy and make them better? Or is he going to be more focused on, making that money and trying to get as many commercials or ads or whatever he can do to fill his bank account before he heads off to the NFL?
I mean, he really has become the poster child for the new NIL movement for college football players, like, for better or for worse. Like, it's great that he really is taking advantage of every opportunity in order to make as much money as he can while he is here in college. But it also, like you said, it does kind of call into question, like, is he a team player? Like, I know several Ohio State fans that are now extremely bitter because they feel like that they and their school have been played more than anything else for a guy to just make money off of their name and their program before he moves on to where apparently he wanted to go the entire time, which was Texas. Because I believe it was down to Ohio State and Texas before he committed to Ohio State. So,
but he's had a weird path. So he when Lincoln was still at OU, and before they signed Caleb Williams, he had been crystal balled to Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
They signed Caleb Williams. He then committed to Texas, decommitted a few weeks later, and then within a few days after his decommitment, committed to Ohio State. And then the whole deal happened where he skipped his, skipped his senior year, whatever.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that from a fantasy perspective that sticks out to me is just based off of kind of some of the vibes that we're getting from him. It would not surprise me. And I think that dynasty owners need to kind of think about this as they're investing in him. It would not surprise me if he has a really, really nice year that he sits out the next year and then goes pro.
I would really, if that becomes a pattern in college football where players just sit out their third years or second years as soon as they feel comfortable with where they'll be drafted in the NFL, I don't. There's a lot of things I've been willing to accept and change over the past couple of years in college football, like NIL, like players opting out in bowl games and stuff like that. Like there's things I understand. I don't like the idea of players basically coming in and being one and done. They're there for 1 year and then just sit for the next 2 years and they're still good to go. They'll still be drafted by the NFL. I'm not sure if that's something that just me as a college football fan am going to enjoy, but also just as a CFF player. Like there's not going to be anything worse like projecting an entire offseason for a guy maybe to be a first round player, and then all of a sudden as the season gets closer, he's like, oh, I'm hearing good things about the NFL. I'm just going to sit out this season all of a sudden. And then we're already at such a disadvantage in CFF where things are constantly being thrown at us, players information just not being shared with the public, that I just don't need additional stresses like that being added to everything else.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I hope it doesn't happen, but he's been very public that even during his recruitment out of high school, he said, this is going to be a business decision for me. I'm looking to make business decisions. So when you hear that, you definitely think that he could be the guy that forgoes that third year just to make sure he's ready for the NFL.
Yeah, and he's already been a trailblazer on so many different things. It would not be the least bit surprising to me if he was that first player to say, listen, I'm going to sit out a third year. Y'all can't stop me. So even still, obviously the biggest transfer news story of the day. We spent a lot of time on that. We'll go ahead and move through. We got 4 more guys we need to talk about here. Some of these guys probably not going to take nearly as long as we just talked about Mr. Ewers there. But also one of the big names that has sparked a lot of interest in CFF circles has been Mr. Dillon Gabriel transferring out of UCF. Has not picked a landing zone yet. Many people thought that he would be transferring to Ole Miss with Jeff Lebby, still the offensive coordinator there. That has been thrown out the window with him moving to Oklahoma. And a lot of people have since then said maybe he now goes to Oklahoma if Caleb Williams goes out the door. But from what it sounds like, Caleb Williams is sticking put at Oklahoma, which leads to the recent crystal balling of Dillon Gabriel to UCLA. So, Nate, what are your thoughts on Dillon Gabriel, and where would you like to see him go?
Yeah, this is probably going to be a great example of we're going to, if you're listening to this podcast a few days after we recorded, we're probably going to sound really foolish because he'll end up somewhere that we haven't even considered. But yeah, he was recruited by Jeff Lebby to Central Florida. So all indications were he was going to go to Ole Miss. The fact that he is not even visited Oklahoma, there's no talk with any of the inside scoop with OU guys that he is considering Oklahoma leads me to believe. And the fact that Caleb Williams he's practicing right now. He's practicing for the bowl game. He recently posted on IG that he's, there at OU and everything like that. So it sounds like he's moving on from the Lebby situation. And UCLA's they've been courting for a little while, so we'll see if that plays out. That gives me some indication that maybe Chip Kelly thinks that DTR is moving on. Otherwise, what's the point?
True.
So, yeah, I mean, I think UCLA is a good fit. I think he can run that Chip Kelly RPO. It's not significantly different from Jeff Levy's style, so I think it's a fit. I think Ole Miss at with Lane Kiffin would also be a fit. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out for him.
I definitely think, honestly, he might be an upgrade over DTR. Like Dillon was always kind of impressed me in his passing ability when he was there under Josh Heupel in that offense. Maybe he just had some great receivers to throw to, but DTR definitely, we thought he might take a step forward this year in his passing ability. Just never really took off at any point during this year. So I think Dillon Gabriel might be able to produce that rushing ability that we've come to love from DTR, but also kind of improve the passing game for UCLA just a little bit. So I would love him there. And then I've talked about it with Mitch Hart a couple of times, and he's adamant that if Dillon Gabriel goes to Ole Miss, he's a top 3 quarterback for CFF next year. What do you think about that claim, Nate? Do you think that is that good of a fit?
No, that's a little bit too rich for me. I would not say top 3. There's a lot of really good quarterbacks out there. I think it's a good fit. Without Jeff Levy, though, I do think there would be a learning curve for him. The system would be different in whoever Lane brings around, or if Lane then assumes the primary role as the offensive coordinator there. I do think it would be really nice. I think the Ole Miss quarterback vacancy is the hottest of all the transfer portal spots. I don't know why one of these quarterbacks hasn't just came in and taken their offer and run with it and just said, this is mine, and stake their claim and put an end to that musical chair right there, because I think it is a primary spot. I don't think it'll be, or at least I wouldn't invest top 3 quarterback in Dillon Gabriel there.
It could be that maybe Ole Miss is the one being picky. Maybe they are getting interest from some of these guys. And maybe they're kind of doing a little wait and see kind of deal, like slow playing some of these guys, like trying to see who else comes into the portal. Like we already got Cameron Ward coming up from Incarnate Word. There's word that he's interested in the Ole Miss job. Probably one of these guys that they're slow playing a little bit. Like, listen, you would fit our offense a little bit better, but quarterbacks are going to enter the portal like further down the road. Like this is really the first wave of transfers right here after the season. After the bowl games, there's going to be another wave of transfers, and then after spring practice, there's going to be a whole nother wave of transfers. Maybe Ole Miss is just kind of biding their time, knowing that their program right now, they've shown they can produce what's likely a first-round quarterback in Matt Corral going forward. So they know that they're going to be a hot commodity, and so maybe they're just trying to feel their way out.
Yeah, it's a prime spot. I hope somebody takes it soon. It's going to be awesome.
Hopefully. So we'll move on. We got one more quarterback we want to talk about here, and that's quarterback Max Johnson out of LSU entering the transfer portal. Xavier and I, during the entire offseason, I was team Miles Brennan. He was team Max Johnson. We were going back and forth the entire season. It's like, no, Miles is going to win the job. No, Max is going to win the job. Well, Miles got knocked out because of injury. He's in the portal. And so I'm like, okay, Max Johnson's the quarterback of the future for LSU. Well, now he's in the portal as well. Likely due to the fact that, the coaching regimen change has happened. Ed Ogeron out, Brian Kelly in. Sounds like that either Max Johnson was not performing well enough to be guaranteed the starting job next year, and it looks like he's just taken himself into the transfer portal and is betting on himself. What do you think, Nate?
I was team Max Johnson before the season. I think both of these guys could end up benefiting if they land in the right spot. Both the guys, meaning Max Johnson and Miles Brennan. I don't really know I don't have a good feel of where Max Johnson goes. I do know that South Carolina and Shane Beamer are pushing really, really hard to find a QB in the transfer portal. They were somebody where that was a program that offered him coming out. I do think he stays P5 because he's a package deal with his brother, who's a pretty high level tight end recruit. It's an incoming freshman. He was a LSU commit, who recently decommitted once Max Johnson entered the transfer portal. So my guess is they go somewhere P5. It seems like South Carolina would be a pretty decent fit. They need a QB. They highlight tight ends pretty well there. So not super exciting from a CFF standpoint, but somewhere where he could probably get the start right away.
I mean, it's exciting if you're a Gamecock fan. Like that would probably be the best quarterback you've had in years. Yeah. But you're right. Again, I think that's a great call, calling out his brother. Wherever he signs to is likely where Max Johnson ends up transferring to. I think that most people would kind of get on board with that. I guess we can also take this time to talk about Myles Brennan a little bit. Like, again, obviously he transferred earlier in the season after it became clear Max Johnson was going to keep the job. Myles couldn't stay healthy to save his life. Do you think Myles Brennan is also the kind of guy that stays P5, or do you think he kind of shifts over to G5?
See, I don't have a really good feel for him because he not decommitted, but he entered the transfer portal, a while ago. So he's kind of been putting out feelers there for a while, and it's really been pretty quiet on kind of where he's landing. So I could see him as that type that lands at like a high level G5. I'm just thinking off the top of my head a couple examples here, but like a Cincinnati, or UCF. I mean, let's be honest, Dillon Gabriel moving on. Mikey Keene didn't exactly set the world on fire, something like that. So a high level Boise State, those types of programs that are consistently competing for decent bowl games, conference titles, that type of thing. I could see Myles Brennan as a fit there, or he could go the route of, kind of, like a South Carolina or Arizona type, something like that.
I think I think that's a very, very fair call. I think we're both kind of in the same boat where it's interesting that both of these quarterbacks, we were all debating on who would get the starting job at LSU, both kind of disappointed in their own ways as the season went on, and now they're both in the transfer portal. It'll be interesting to see if Walker Howard, 5-star coming in as a freshman, see if he can take that job just immediately next year. Obviously, Brian Kelly posted that picture with him, or that video with him not too long ago, which was, good Lord, Brian Kelly, you're providing entertainment in all the best and worst ways right now. But
Brian Kelly's a hot mess right now, and it's like a car wreck. You can't stop watching, and he continues to do some of the most hilarious things.
Hey, man, it won't matter if he's winning 10, 11 games at LSU
exactly
every single
right.
year. So
he can have the worst Cajun accent possible, and as long as he's winning, or beating Alabama, they don't care at all.
Exactly. So we'll move on to our fourth transfer player here. We got Mr. Tiyon Evans out of Tennessee. Transferring to Louisville. I know a lot of people were very excited when Tiyon Evans, who really was clearly the best running back Tennessee had to offer this year, entered the transfer portal. A lot of people were looking for him to really go to a backfield where he could truly dominate. I was kind of floating the idea of maybe him going to Coastal Carolina. If he could really get there and just dominate that backfield, I thought that would have been incredible. But he's moving on to Louisville. To the collective question mark of everybody that read this news. So, Nate, what are you kind of feeling here?
Evans was actually one of those guys that coming out, I had tweeted about him and thought that there was a chance because the old staff that left before Heupel got there was really, really high on him. Mm-hmm. So I thought there was a chance he could end up being one of their their top back and somebody that makes a real big difference for them this year. This transfer doesn't excite me at all. Louisville's they're one of those programs where if you want to, I mean, they historically have ran out one guy and had a workhorse and that type of thing. But with Cooley and Hassan Hall
Hassan Hall's in the transfer portal.
Oh, Hassan Hall's okay. Even still, what's the other guy that's there?
Mitchell.
With, Mitchell. Yeah. So I mean, we're looking at a three-way competition. I like Cooley quite a bit. So I think Evans can win this job and be productive. I don't know that he can. So it's kind of an odd transfer because I know that he probably could have been the better back at Tennessee. But Heupel's going to have a committee approach, a split approach, no matter what. So if he can win this job, he then becomes very valuable. I don't know that we're going to know that until, week 2 or 3. That's the problem.
It kind of reminds me, I'll bring up another Tennessee running back here, transfer running back, but it kind of reminds me of Ty Chandler in this past year to North Carolina, where a lot of people saw Ty Chandler go there and they're like, wait a minute, don't they have like backs already there? Like guys like Josh Henderson, guys like British Brooks, who was like the lead back in their bowl game against Texas A&M. A lot of people are like, all right, are we sure that Ty Chandler could take over this backfield as the main back? And he did this season, and he was quite valuable. If I remember correctly, he finished as the RB25. So not like fantastic, but like still a very valuable piece to have week to week on your fantasy rosters. So am I crazy here, Nate? Am I crazy for kind of feeling that vibe here?
No, I think that's fair. I do think that North Carolina historically, at least under Phil Longo, has a more dynamic offense, but Louisville has shown, like I said, that they can find a workhorse and really run with that. Javion Hawkins was extremely productive for him. So it's just, like I said, you're likely, unless there's another rash of transfers out of Louisville, you're likely going to go into your draft not knowing what the exact situation is going to be there.
We would definitely need to see like very accurate reports coming out of spring camp and even really into fall camp. Like unless something like that comes out and this says like Evans is clearly the guy, pretty much I'd say most people are going to be avoiding him for the most part, or they'll take him late in the drafts as like an upside kind of guy.
Right.
So we'll hit up our last transfer for tonight. We got Mr. Jadon Haselwood transferring from your alma mater, Oklahoma, over to Arkansas. Pretty much everybody saw this come onto their feed, and everybody was like, all right, we got our Treylon Burks replacement as of now. So what do you think about that, Nate?
I think it's a good fit for him. It's Kendall Briles has shown that he can really highlight a receiver. I think that they've got decent quarterback play there. Everything aligns for him to be productive. If you're expecting Treylon Burks type of numbers, productivity, you're going to be super disappointed. He just doesn't have that level of ability or talent that Burks has. But I do think it's a really, really good fit. I think he had something like around 38 to 40 catches for about 400 yards and 5 or 6 touchdowns for OU this year. I think that he could outproduce those numbers. I don't think he's going to double those numbers and be, an 80 catch, 1,010 type wide receiver. That's just, I don't think that's in his realm of outcomes.
Yeah, it seems like ever since he had the ACL injury in his freshman year, he just hasn't quite been the same wide receiver. Because I believe, if I remember correctly, he was a top 4 player in his recruiting class coming out of high school. Like he was easily one of the best players in the country. And then he got to Oklahoma, tore his ACL, and just like I said, it just really hasn't felt like he's been the same player ever since. But maybe all he needs is just a fresh start. Maybe he does come into Arkansas next year and is that dominant guy. Again, I'm not drafting him as such, but it also wouldn't surprise me. Maybe if he just kicks it up to next year. KJ Jefferson coming back next year, having another year in the system. I imagine he'll be better next year. And again, if Haselwood is in that X receiver spot in this offense, regardless of whether or not he has the talent to replicate what Burks did, he's probably still going to get at least probably 70, 80% of the volume that Burks got. And like you said, volume's key when it comes to CFF. So I think he's still probably going to be a pretty good option here as long as we hear good things coming out of camp, obviously.
Yeah, it's a good fit. It's a really good fit. He apparently is was the player to be determined later for the Mike Woods trade, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. You're right. So those are our big transfer names. And so now we're going to move on to the third segment of today. We're going to discuss some of these bowl games. Not really going to call like predictions of who wins these games, but more talking about just like how these teams got here. Do we like the matchup? Do we think it's going to be an entertaining game? And just things that we're looking out for overall. And really no other place to start than the two playoff games. And first, foremost, we'll start with the number 1 team versus number 4 team, Alabama versus Cincinnati. Nate, I'll let you start off with this one. What are your thoughts on this game, and what are you looking for?
I am really, really fascinated by what's going to happen between Williams versus the incredible secondary that Cincinnati has. I mean, they've got some lockdown dudes as far as their quarterbacks, and obviously John Mechie's out for this game. So it's from a fantasy perspective, it's okay. Williams is a dominant wide receiver. Can he still dominate with those guys, or can those guys, I guess, if they want to improve their draft capital, the secondary for Cincinnati, can they contain him? But I'm also looking from a fantasy perspective. Who's going to step up at wide receiver for Alabama in this situation? Oh, yeah. Because we've been wondering, ever since preseason, okay, who's going to be that guy? There's obviously a handful of stud freshmen that came in. Are one of those guys going to step up? Is it going to be Trayshawn Holden? Who's going to be the guy that starts to make plays for Alabama on what apparently is going to be the biggest stage?
I mean, I think you're 100% right, and that has been really the question all year long. And we saw in the Auburn game, Jameson Williams goes out, and when it's just down to Mechie as that clear one receiver, it's easy for defenses to kind of lock in on this Bama offense and for them to, again, to limit them, especially with when there's only one really dynamic receiver for Bama. And it really didn't come down until Ja'Cory Brooks started making plays for Bama during that final drive and eventually scoring the final touchdown, when Bama really looked like Bama again all of a sudden on that final drive. And I think Brooks is the name to kind of look for here. He's definitely become my favorite out of the freshman receivers for Bama this year. But obviously there's still guys to look forward to, like Ajay Hall, JoJo Earl, Christian Leary. All three of those guys are obviously names to look out for here. But yeah, like you said, like Georgia as putrid as a performance they had against Bama. Once John Mechie was knocked out of that game, all of a sudden you did see kind of Bama's offense slow down just a little bit more when Georgia could key in on really just one dynamic receiver for them to worry about from them going forward. So Cincinnati does have the secondary to, I think, accomplish that. So the player I'm really looking forward to here on Bama's side, Brian Robinson, coming back healthy into this game. Hopefully he's had some time to heal up, and I think he's going to be the guy that Bama's going to need to put on their shoulders, because as great as Cincinnati's defense has been, their run game has really been their kind of leak point when it comes to it. So I think Brian Robinson and Trey Sanders are going to be the two guys really to look out for here. What do you think about the Cincinnati side of things? Anybody you're really looking forward to on the offense there?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how Jerome Ford plays against his old team.
True.
We forget, but it's been a few years, but he was actually an Alabama player. He signed with them and was there for, I don't know, a year or two before he moved on to Cincinnati. So really interested to see. He's been dominant this year. Really interested to see if he can work in space and be able to make a few plays and be able to be a stud on that type of scene.
No, absolutely. And I think Desmond Ridder, I mean, obviously he's going to be another name to watch for here. This is a guy that I think is among the Devy players, among the really just NFL fantasy players and everything, looking to this draft this next year. Is a very divisive player. I know some people who think he's a first-round lock. I know some people who think that he should be nowhere near that. And I think this is the game to prove that one way or another. Going up against Bama, regardless of how you feel about their defense overall, more than anything, their defense is not up to standard with where we know Bama's defense normally is, but they're still a pretty freaking good defense, and they got a lot of playmakers on that defense. that if Desmond Ridder does play in the NFL, is likely going to be playing against in the NFL in the future. So I think this is a big, big moment for him as well, and I'm excited to see what he can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll hit up our second playoff game here. We got Michigan. We got Georgia. I'll start off with this one because you guys know why. I'm a Georgia fan. Just graduated from Georgia, still here at Georgia, getting my master's degree. And good God Almighty, it's good to be back in the playoffs. Since the first time we've been back here since 2017. Not really the way we wanted to enter into the playoffs. Definitely was a bit of a stinger to go 12-0 in the regular season, only to lose to our nemesis once again in the biggest of stages, which is a very big shame. But it gives people an opportunity to kind of pick themselves back up by the bootstraps, and Georgia's got to get prepared for this game, because if they want that rematch with Bama, if Bama even wins their game against Cincinnati, they got to get through Michigan here. And I think this is like Bama, Cincinnati, I think, is likely the higher scoring game out of the two playoff games. And this is one that's going to be the one that people are looking at and saying, this one could easily end with both teams under 20 points if they let them. So, Nate, what do you think in this game? What are you looking for?
So I think you'll be happy to hear that I think Georgia is actually going to not only win this game, but I think that they're probably going to win it comfortably. As far as a playoff matchup can go, I think that what Michigan excels at, as far as like the power run, really plays into what Georgia can do as far as the defense. Their biggest vulnerabilities in the secondary, I don't know that Cade McNamara is going to be able to exploit that. So I think it's kind of best on best here. What Michigan likes to do, Georgia likes to be able to stop, and vice versa. So I'm really, more than anything, I guess I'm just interested. What's gonna happen with the quarterback situation in Georgia? Is Stetson Bennett gonna be able to take the next level? Because he's gonna get pressure all night, no matter what. I know, Aiden Hutchinson's gonna be back there just giving him fits. So if Georgia gets up early, then that's probably gonna allow him, a little bit better opportunity to kind of settle in and not have to be the guy. But Georgia has a little bit of an issue in my opinion, if Michigan finds a way to kind of take that lead early, and it forces Stetson Bennett's hand to go out there and make plays. I wanted to see it before the Bama game. He disappointed. Sorry, but he did. And so, but I do think this is a situation where Georgia can play from the lead and have that game script to where they don't put the quarterback situation at risk.
I think it's fair. And based on what I've heard, as of now, there's not a plan to shift the quarterback. But a lot of it has to do with the reason, like you're saying. Aiden Hutchinson, there's going to be pressure on Stetson Bennett. So who would you rather have back there? The guy who can move around in the pocket with Stetson Bennett, even if he's not the most accurate quarterback in the world? Or would you rather have JT Daniels, who, let's be honest, one of his biggest weaknesses is the fact that he can't move around in that pocket? And he is the kind of guy that will take a lot of those unnecessary sacks if you leave him back there a little bit too long. I think when it comes to this game, I think you're right. On paper, Georgia has the advantage here. Georgia's offense, really, when they can throw out of luxury, taking a line here from Josh Pate, because I think he describes it perfectly. When they can throw out of luxury versus throw out of necessity, Georgia's offense is really one of the most efficient in the country. When they're not forced into a single way to run their offense, when they can run when they want to, when they can pass when they want to, they're one of the most deadly offenses in the country. But when you force them into one dimension, it can get bad for them very quickly. And this doesn't seem like the kind of game where Michigan could ever really get a lead on Georgia to where they have to play a way they don't want to play. And that's why I think, like you said, I think Georgia can easily take care of business here and then hopefully get their rematch against Bama in the national championship. Or they could play against Cincinnati, in which case, as a Georgia fan, I'll be feeling a whole lot better. Anyway, move on to some more of these New Year's Six games. Coming back down here to Georgia, the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, which is like the most Georgia bowl I've ever seen in my entire life. Only makes sense that there's no Georgia teams in this. We got Pittsburgh versus Michigan State. Nate, what are you looking forward to in this game, and what do you think?
Well, I think it all comes down to is what's the situation with Pitt and Kenny Pickett with their OC moving on. I guess it sounds like at this point I haven't heard any indications that he's not playing. And I mean, we're in the middle of bowl prep, so I assume he's been practicing. So I think at this point we have to assume he's playing. This is going to be one of the more entertaining New Year's Six bowls. Neither one of these teams defend the pass all that well. Both of them can pass it fairly well. So Pitt passes it one of the best in the country. So yeah, I mean, if you're in the middle of a CFF bowl draft and you're a believer Kenny Pickett's going to play, I mean, Kenny Pickett, Jordan Addison, I mean, you're talking about high end draft picks right there, given the fact that Michigan State secondary has failed to cover anybody all year.
I believe they're the worst in the country in terms of yards allowed.
They are atrocious. So I think the interesting matchup is going to be how successful Kenneth Walker can be against a pretty decent Pitt run defense. I mean, Narduzzi loves to be able to stop the run. He leaves his corners on islands in an effort to stop the run. So it's going to be interesting to see how successful he can be. I think this ends up being, if all players play, I think this ends up being a little bit of a shootout. Despite the fact that Mark Whipple's moved on to Nebraska, it'll be really interesting to see how that Pitt offense looks though without him.
Have they announced who's the new OC at Pittsburgh?
They have not. I know that a lot of indications are that, or at least from Pitt fans, the wide receivers coach is very well thought of.
Okay.
And they would like to see him kind of elevate to that role. So we'll see if that's the direction the Nard Dog goes.
I mean, like you said, it's the obvious matchup you'd want to exploit either in a bowl league, or if you're just really doing prize picks and just prop picks and stuff like that. Kenny Pickett passing against his abysmal Michigan State passing defense is obviously the one to exploit. And again, it'll be interesting to see, obviously Kenneth Walker's the big name for Michigan State, but if they want to move the ball, if they get put into a shootout, it'll be put on Peyton Thorne's shoulders. And if you got who's supposedly his best friend, Jayden Reed, I think he'll be another guy to watch here. I forget. Have we gotten word on Naylor? When is he supposed to come back? I forget off the top of my head.
I have not heard. It sounded like he, just based off what I was reading from the beat writers, that he was fairly close towards the end of the season. So my guess would be that he's going to be good to go, but you don't know.
Well, if they have both of those guys, I feel a little bit better about Michigan State's passing opportunities in this game. And I think that'll make this game a little bit more interesting. But like you said, obviously, this really is, if you're going to watch this game, you're going to watch it for a lot of these big-time NFL draft prospects for this year. Kenny Pickett, Kenneth Walker, guys like that. Should be a very interesting one. If I wasn't going down to Miami around New Year's, I probably would have tried to get tickets for this game, because this one just seemed like it would have been a fun one to just go to and have no real rooting interest and just watch a couple of great players play.
Absolutely.
So we'll move on to our next, I believe, fourth New Year's Six game here, and we got Notre Dame versus Oklahoma State in the PlayStation Fiesta Bowl. Notre Dame right outside the cusp of the playoffs. Didn't really ever seem like that, with the way things played out, that they were going to get in. Oklahoma State, obviously another team right there on the cusp of the playoffs right before championship weekend, and literally came inches short of making the playoffs. Probably still wouldn't have made the playoffs with Georgia losing to Bama. Probably still would have been on the outside looking in there. So two teams very, very close to the playoffs in their own regard. Notre Dame losing Brian Kelly. Obviously, it was a big stinger. Marcus Freeman, now the head coach there. Oklahoma State losing their longtime defensive coordinator to Ohio State. So the guy that really has kind of saved their season on multiple fronts this year, now gone for them. What do you think about this game, Nate? Who are you looking at? What are you looking for?
A few things. One, I did not realize until you put this graphic up that PlayStation sponsors this bowl, so that's kind of funny. I had no idea. Everything we just said about Pitt and Michigan State, you can go ahead and throw out the window for this game because it's basically the polar opposite. Both these teams do play really good defense. Oklahoma State has been really good at both against the pass and the run. I think I read, am I right? Williams is not playing for Notre Dame, right? He is announced he's going pro.
Yeah, no, Kyron Williams is gone.
Yeah. So I think from a fantasy perspective, that's the thing that I'm most interested in is, okay, what type of rotation are we looking at as far as the running backs there at Notre Dame? I'm of the belief that I think that Logan Diggs is the guy that gets most of the carries. Tyree's been a little banged up. And he's just kind of been the one that's kind of taken over as of, the last month or two of the season. So, but it'd be really interesting to see how that situation plays out. But I do think this is a low scoring game. I don't trust anything that Spencer Sanders does with the football because it usually results in a turnover. So I would probably give a little bit of an advantage here to Notre Dame, but obviously they're the ones. Well, I mean, Oklahoma, I would say Notre Dame's the one that's had a lot of changes go on between the coaching staff and their players that are declaring pro, whatnot. But at the same time, Oklahoma State just lost their defensive coordinator to Ohio State. So there's a little bit of change for them as well. But I think it's lower scoring. Yeah.
I mean, I'm fully with you. The rotation at running back from Notre Dame is definitely the thing I'll be looking at the most for this game. Jaylen Warren being back for Oklahoma State, I think is going to help them out a ton in this game. We saw that run game for Oklahoma State against Baylor in the Big 12 championship without Jaylen Warren was one of the saddest things I've watched in the last couple of months. I'm not going to lie. They really put that game on Spencer Sanders' shoulders, and we all saw how that ended up. I think there was 3 interceptions, maybe 4 off the top of my head. So that's definitely something I'll be looking out for if Jaylen Warren comes back. If Jaylen Warren comes back and announces he's coming back for next year, I think he's going to be another guy that we need to be talking about as definitely a top, I say 1, 2, or not. I wouldn't say first round, but probably round 2 or 3 kind of running back. I think. If he really has solidified that job. Oh, he got.
Yeah, I think he's out of eligibility. This is. I think he was. I think he was a fifth year guy coming.
Well, then
over.
I stand corrected. Jaylen Warren, you served us well. Good luck, sir. Also, one more thing. You mentioned the PlayStation. Whichever team wins this game, the entire team, everybody gets a free PlayStation, PS5.
Good for them.
So fun stuff for them. So let's move on to the next New Year's game here, and we got probably the most story, the most tradition behind it. We got Big Ten versus Pac-12. Ohio State, runner-up in the Big Ten West with Michigan going off to the playoffs. I'm sure they love hearing that. Are compensated with an appearance with the Rose Bowl against first Rose Bowl participants. Our first-time Rose Bowl participants, Utah. Utah has had quite the storied season. Started off very, very rough for them. I think they started off 1-2, losing to San Diego State, losing to another team that they really should just not have lost to, and then just ripped off win after win after win to close out the season. Ended up as a top-ranked Pac-12 team, winning the Pac-12, destroying Oregon twice. They've had quite the season. Ohio State at one point looked almost unstoppable on offense until Michigan was just able to have the secondary necessary in order to slow Ohio State down just enough, and then exploited the fact that Ohio State's run defense really just hasn't been all it's cracked up to be throughout the season. And I guess I'll just transition to my thoughts in this game. The biggest matchup I'd be looking for is Tavion Thompson against that Ohio State rushing defense. Pretty much every time Ohio State's gone up against a stud running back this year, Mohamed Ibrahim, CJ Verdell, Hassan Haskins, really the 3 names that come to mind. They've struggled big time in those games. 2 of those games they've lost, and you got Tavion Thompson coming into this game, looking as the number 1 back for the Utes going forward. I think that's going to be the matchup I'm looking forward to the most. What do you think, Nate? What are you looking for here? Nate, you are muted. There we go.
I totally agree with you. I think that Tavion Thomas is going to be the thing that I'm looking the most for. The the Ohio State defense is significantly improved as far as their rush defense over the course of the season. So it's going to be really fun to see him and how he performs against a high level defense as far as setting the tone for his CFF value moving forward. Does he enter the draft? Does he come back? If he comes back,
hope he comes back.
I do too. I think he's been fantastic, and just like we talked about with Braylon Allen, Utah is also one of those. In fact, their offensive coordinator used to be at Wisconsin back in the Monty Ball and those types of days. But it's one of those systems that produces perennial big time running backs in the CFF world. So I do hope he returns. If he doesn't return, that then becomes a prime transfer spot because TJ Pledger has already announced he's going pro. So
that one weird.
That was weird. Yeah, I actually stashed him in a few deep dynasties, thinking, okay, well, I'm gonna kind of cover my butt here. If Tavion goes pro, I'm gonna have TJ Pledger waiting in the wings. But so yeah, I totally agree with you. That's going to be a really interesting situation. I'm kind of curious how Ohio State offense responds. They've got a lot of guys that are looking to go pro between Wilson and Olave and all that. How hyped are they really going to be for this game? They're the type of program that plays for a national championship or bust. Mm-hmm. So in their eyes, this could be considered a bust season. So do they show up to this bowl game, or do they just kind of go through the motions? Utah's not the type of team you just want to go through the motions against, because they're going to be well coached, and they'll come out and really kind of punch you in the face. So, but I think this is going to be one of the more entertaining games, despite it being almost a touchdown spread.
I think it's going to be a very emotional game, especially if you're a Utah fan, because, again, you follow them throughout the season. That number 22 has really meant something a lot for Utah throughout the season. I think for them to cap off how the season has gone with a Pac-12 championship and then a Rose Bowl appearance and a win, I think would play a lot for that program. And then, like you said, with Ohio State, I think the interesting thing to watch is just who plays in this game. Because you got guys like Chris Olave, you got guys like Wilson. Like, do they play? Are we going to get a look at how Ohio State looks next year? Is Jackson Smith and Jigba become the clear wide receiver number one? Or are we looking at maybe guys like Emeka Egbuka, Marvin Harrison Jr., maybe a Julian Fleming sighting might be possible here? I think that'll be interesting to watch to see who might step up for Ohio State going into next year. So let's set up our last New Year's Six game. We got the Big 12 versus the SEC in the All-State Sugar Bowl. We got Big 12 champion Baylor versus third place finisher in the SEC, with both Alabama and Georgia going off to the playoff. We got Ole Miss in this game as well. So Nate, what are your thoughts on this game? What are you looking for?
I think this is going to be an interesting game to watch. It's clearly a clash of styles. Baylor is defensive based, run heavy, kind of punch in the mouth, kind of the Utah of the Big 12, so to speak, with Dave Aranda running the show over there. And obviously Ole Miss, going to be fun to see how they look without Jeff Lebby calling the plays. Obviously Kiffin's still around, so I have no doubts that they will be just fine on offense, but there will be an adjustment for them. I think their wide receivers, should they all play? It's hard to tell who's for sure going to be playing in these bowl games at this point. But yeah, if their three top wide receivers play, then it's probably the healthiest they've been since week one. It's probably the healthiest Matt Corral's been since early in the season, because he's taken a beating this year. So I think it'll be really fun to see just kind of how Ole Miss looks with everybody looking a little bit more healthy.
I mean, I agree with you 100%. I think, what was his name that played in the Big 12 championship? I forget his name off the top of my head, the quarterback.
Shapen, Blake Shapen.
Yeah. I think it'll be interesting to see if he plays in this game, or if Baylor moves back to Jerry Bohannon. Because if they move back to Jerry Bohannon, I wouldn't be surprised if Chapin maybe then takes a look maybe at the transfer portal. He might be a guy that we might want to keep an eye on going forward because he played extremely well against that Oklahoma State defense in that game, played with a lot of poise. Couldn't quite get things going in the second half, which is why Oklahoma State almost was able to come back and win that game. But the quarterback position at Baylor, I think, is going to be something I'll be keeping an eye on here. And then, like you said, with Ole Miss, it would be very, very nice to see. Like, we saw that Ole Miss offense at the beginning of the season against Louisville, against Tulane, and stuff like that. Again, one of those offenses that just looked borderline unstoppable. Kind of like an Ohio State was looking near the mid to late portions of the season. And then injury after injury after injury just started occurring. Matt Corral got beat up in that Tennessee game where I think they ran him like 30 times. And so really things just haven't really looked the same since then. And I would love to see this Ole Miss offense just have kind of one last hurrah before they head out.
I do believe Aranda came out and said that Bohannon is going to be good to go for this game and he will start. So I will say that if he doesn't play well, or if Chapin has to come in, kind of save the day, one of those type of situations, I think it's a full blown quarterback competition in the spring at Baylor. If Bohannon comes in, looks like he has the entire season and plays really well, then I think it's definitely his job moving forward.
No, I think that's
Chapin's been good, man.
I would say he played very well in that Big 12 championship, a lot better than I was. Literally, I was joking with some of my friends. When I heard that news, I'm just like, well, I guess Oklahoma State's going to the playoffs. I was wrong. I was very, very wrong. So those are the New Year's 6 games. Again, just basic previews, just kind of talking about how the teams got here, guys we're looking at for those games. Next 6 games, we got 6 more games. We're going to go through those a lot more quickly. And basically what's going to happen here, Nate has 3 bowl games that he has lined up here, and I'm just going to let him talk. And he's going to explain to you guys the 3 bowl games that he is looking forward to the most outside of the New Year's 6, whether that be just because of the narrative behind the game, players playing in the game, just the matchup between 2 teams. We'll figure it out. But Nate, we'll go ahead and start with your first one, and you just go.
Very good. So, I've listed here Purdue, Tennessee. I'll be quick as I'm running through these. From a fantasy perspective, I'm stoked about this game. I mean, these are obviously 2 of the more high-powered offenses that we'll see as far as the bowl games are concerned. I want to see if Milton Wright can take that next step as the guy moving forward. Tennessee, I still think it's going to be a running back by committee next year, but can Small make a little bit of some headway in being the leader of the pack there? I think it's going to be a really, really entertaining game to watch because these 2 teams can really, put up some points.
All right.
Next one I'll talk about is the Liberty Bowl here with Mississippi State and Texas Tech. I like to refer to this as the Mike Leach Bowl. He's going up against his old team. Leach is the type that if he can twist the knife, he will do it every opportunity that he has. It's going to be really entertaining to see just kind of what the media buildup is to this game. 2 teams that are obviously scoring a bunch of points. I'm interested to see with the quarterback situation. This is an opportunity for them to kind of figure out at Texas Tech. Okay, can I put on a little bit of show in front of Kitley here? This is kind of like my opportunity to show that that I'm the guy moving forward for next year. I still think there's a chance that Tech brings in a transfer to compete there at quarterback. Based off some of my dynasty shares, I'm hoping that I hope Sawyer Robertson from Mississippi State also has a chance, but Baron Morton for Texas Tech competes next year for that position. But either way, I think that it's going to be a really high scoring, fun fantasy type game.
Absolutely.
And then the last one I'll talk about is the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl here, Wake Forest and Texas A&M. This is a clash of 2 totally different styles here. A&M being kind of a juggernaut on defense this year. Wake Forest, obviously, a perennial fun college fantasy football team to invest in. They run 82, 83 plays a game every year. If you average out the last 3 years, Wake Forest has run the most plays of any team in football. So it's going to be really fun to see how they compete against one of the SEC's better defenses. And if Sam Hartman does put on a show, does this mean this is the last we see of him, or are we going to see him back next year throwing to A.T. Perry?
Yeah, again, I agree with you. All three of those games are very, very interesting. And I honestly completely forgot about the Mike Leach Bowl there at the Liberty Bowl, Mississippi State versus Texas Tech. That's just a fun one. I hope that whoever runs that game, I think it's ESPN runs all these games, but they really need to play up that angle. They really need to just have fun with that. Get Mike Leach in an interview every chance that they get. Like, that's the thing. A lot of these bowls need to have personalities, and I really love when they can get a matchup like that with Mississippi State versus Texas Tech, where there's something really beyond just a game to play for. And you'll see in a common thread with my 3 games, I like bowls where we can get teams that are usually like in the conversation for like conference championships and everything. I like when we get matchups we don't see a lot playing against each other. First one up here, I got Clemson versus Iowa State. 2 teams that I think have underperformed clearly compared to where people were talking about early in the season. Clemson, 3 losses. I think a lot of people, if you would have guessed before the season, would never have imagined them getting more than 2 losses in the season. They're down to 3. Iowa State really just could never really get it going like they could in previous years. Might struggle at the beginning. Couldn't really get it going later in this year. But again, you got 2 teams. One usually competes for an ACC championship. One has been competing for the Big 12 championship for the past couple of years. I want to see these 2 teams clash. I want to see. I really just kind of want to see how things go with this one. Again, it's just a fun one for me. The Gasparilla Bowl is the next one I really want to talk about. That's UCF versus Florida. These are the kind of matchups that I love. The battle for Florida. This is what bowl games need to be doing more. They need to find opportunities to get teams into these games that really and truly bring in an extra layer to it. This is a quote-unquote battle for the best team in Florida. Like UCF and Florida, we've been wanting this kind of match for the past couple of years because last couple of years these teams have been very, very good. But now here they are playing in Florida. I'm looking forward to this game a lot, especially from what it sounds like. UCF has absolutely packed the stadium. Like, this should be a near home crowd advantage for UCF for this game. I think this will be a fun one. There's not a ton of fantasy I'm really looking forward to in here. Again, I just like good, well thought out matchups in these bowl games. And then the last one I have here, again, I've talked about this. I like seeing teams that you would just never really think about matching up against each other. Penn State versus Arkansas. Arkansas has been struggling mightily past couple of years. They've really hit it off with Coach Sam Pittman. Gotten to I forget what place they finished in the SEC West, but even so, I think this is like the first 8-win season in years. Penn State definitely disappointing a little bit. Dropped some games that they really shouldn't have to teams like Illinois, but here they are playing against Arkansas, one of the hottest teams of the SEC. I think that'll definitely be a fun one. And again, not a ton of fantasy really here, unless I would like to see what Arkansas is going to be doing with their running back position. I would love to see maybe that not be so by committee going forward. But so these are just fun matchups that I think are going to be fun going forward. So those are my 3. Nate, did you want to touch on any of those, or are you good to go?
No, I think all of those are going to be really entertaining games. Most of yours are a little bit more defensive oriented than some of mine, but are clearly some power programs that missed out on some of the New Year's Six bowls. So it'll be really interesting to see how they perform against each other.
Yeah, again, like bowl season's right around the corner, and when these games get closer, we'll be breaking them down a little bit more, really kind of deep diving into what players really to look for as the games get closer. I'd love to give you guys a lot of that information now, but as we've kind of hinted at and touched on throughout the show, so much we just don't know because of opt-outs and stuff like that. Like, I'd love to have just be releasing like player rankings for bowl games and stuff like that. But again, we just don't know who's playing and who's not, and we don't want to like recommend somebody who the next day we find out is just not even playing in the game. But even still, that's our show for today, y'all. Nate, I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a blast to finally meet you. Talked to you a lot on Twitter, but it's finally great to put a name to a face. And I think you brought on a ton of great analysis, a lot of good insight for people tonight. Is there anything you want to say before we get out of here?
No, I think we covered most of it. I quickly double checked just to make sure that what I said about Jaylen Warren being out of eligibility was correct, and that is correct. I was starting to kind of question myself, but yeah, he is out of eligibility. But no, man, that I think that covers it from 2022 and a bowl game standpoint. So it's absolutely a pleasure to be on with you, Jared, and looking forward to the bowl games and everything. So really enjoyed it, man.
Yeah, again, Nate, it's been an honor having you on here. And again, if y'all again, for some reason, if you are following me but you haven't started following Nate on Twitter, he is at CFF Nate, and you need to double check yourselves, because I don't know why you would ever follow me but not be following Nate. Dude's been doing this a lot longer than me, and he has some great insight for you guys. Speaking of following, if you're watching this on YouTube, as always, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, leave those comments down below, whether you are talking about what your favorite bowl game is coming up, or if you are telling me, Jared, you really need to shave a little bit more, your beard's looking a little scratchy. I will take all of it, y'all. I love talking to you guys. Speaking of talking to you guys, you can always find me on Twitter. I'm at CFF_Jared. You can at me on Twitter, or you can just DM me. My DMs are always pretty open. I do my best to respond to you guys in a quick and timely manner. And then if you're listening to this on podcast, make sure you're following us wherever you're listening to, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. And if you're listening to Apple Podcasts, I always love seeing those 5-star reviews. You guys are awesome. Y'all, starting to turn the page towards CFF 2022, getting through this bowl season. We got a lot of fun stuff for you guys coming up, and I can't wait to do it. See y'all. Have a blessed day.